I love this guy, and I have no doubt after this conversation you will too. His name is Dr. Jason Fox. This is the first conversation we ever had captured on this chat, and since then we've had just a ton of great conversations and catch-ups. More recently, I actually saw him in Byron Bay when poet David White was performing / reciting his poetry, which I did an episode on earlier this year. We're extremely different thinkers and talkers. You'll hear the rate of pace in this conversation, but I just admire and respect his really thoughtful, thought-provoking ideas and concepts as well. Jason is bringing out a new book, and he's got a pop-up newsletter. A muse-letter, M-U-S-E letter, which I'll link to in the show notes for this one. This conversation is really around emergence and living and working in ambiguity, as well as embracing your intuition. Enjoy the listen. I'll speak to you tomorrow. My guest today is Dr. Jason Fox, and he is a wizard philosopher masquerading as a motivational speaker and leadership advisor. He works with clever teams, questing amidst complexity and the emergent. Jason's many happy clients include the senior leadership team of Fortune 500 companies around the world, including Microsoft, HP, Red Bull, Cisco, Johnson & Johnson, Toyota, Honda, as well as so many more. In this episode, we riff on many different topics, including the balance between focusing on ideas and acknowledging individuals, the role of holding space for emergence and possibility, what our personal rituals are before and after workshops, and dealing with that energy decline, and what our favorite sort of food to eat after a session is. We get into that kind of detail. The struggle with titles and labels. Jason has lectured at 3 universities and is the best-selling author of The Game Changer and How to Lead a Quest. In addition to serving as a leadership advisor, Dr. Fox is also a globally in-demand keynote speaker who works particularly well with senior leaders and skeptical audiences who have seen it all before. You can find his work at drjasonfox.com or foxwizard.com. Jason, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Oh, it's great to be here with you.
Hey, look, before we begin, can we just talk about how much we love Michael Bungay Stanier, MBS? Big fan?
Yeah, and his latest book, and I know you've got a book out too.
Yes.
It's the season for books. Yeah, love it. Honestly, the guy astounds me how he is relentlessly so warm and cheerful without being fake at all. Like, he's got this genuine warmth and how he shows up, and I feel like I'm a special, like, close friend. Then I realized that so many other people feel the same way too. And it's like he's a master enchanter, and I love it. He's a wonderful person.
Yeah. And I tell you what, the only other person I've met, and again, this is almost ridiculous because I can't believe I'm saying this, but the other person that made me feel that way from initially meeting them was actually Shane Warne. And I met him on Valentine's Day, like 3 weeks before he passed. But it was like just that engaging. He was more interested in my travel. I saw him ran him to the airport. Yeah.
From Michael Bungay Stanier's perspective, he wrote the book on the coaching habit and how to ask better questions, and curiosity is kind of just inherent to him. I guess from my own perspective, I tend to get more interested in ideas, and I can even forget people's names and like the person that I'm speaking to, whereas Michael's good at remembering the person that's in front of me. But whereas I can sometimes get so curious and swept up in the noospheric ideas space that it's almost, I can certainly remember to acknowledge the person as well. So that's something I need to lean into.
It's really interesting. I mean, that comes back into when we're talking about workshops very soon, but I also want to sort of unpack your story. But I remember talking to a leader in my old organization, and he was talking about egos. And he said, when I put an idea on the table, let's talk about the idea and not the person. And I think it is kind of disarming. It takes away maybe the status and the power, perhaps, if it's just you're looking at the idea, not the person behind it.
Yeah, yes, I think that's useful. And I mean, this extends in a lot of cases. Like right now, as we're recording this, Meta has just released Threads, which is their Twitter, clone app. And I'm feeling so fatigued when I look at social media and all of the things going on. And it's made me reflect, what are the spaces that I actually gravitate to? And for me personally, there are little pockets within the cozy web, particularly Discord as a platform, where it doesn't matter about your follower count or your bio or any of those things. It's the conversation and how you show up. And there is something to be said about removing the power implications of status and stuff from ideas itself. However, having said that, someone plonking an idea on the table, if they're still the boss and they still ultimately have the say, we're still going to be factoring that in mind. And also, it is interesting considering, I mean, it might be useful, but all of this stuff is an oscillatory dance. It might be useful, but then we got to think, where is it coming from? Is this from a place of privilege and naivety? Is it from lived experience? Like, all of these things are partly what informs this wonderful phrase that I've come across about 5 or 6 years ago from a book called The Listening Society, this notion of protosynthesis, like a prototype synthesis. We're constantly synthesizing everything we see and read and learn into some sort of working prototype of a model of reality. And that's something that we need to constantly update and imbue with new insights as they come to light. So the delineation can be helpful as long as we don't think that we have clearly delineated, because everything's ultimately entangled and connected.
Oh, it is. And I think I'm glad that you're telling me that, because that gives me a reason to do more overseas trips, because it kind of changes the schema I'm connecting with. Not that I need it anymore.
That's great confirmation bias. That's right. That's right. Tax deductible trip. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
That's nice. Yeah.
Protosynthesizing. Yeah.
That's funny. I need to get some new suits as well for some. It's fun. I mean, and what we just did there, which is a really kind of good ontological turn, we became aware of our own kind of biases in a metacognitive state. And then there's what metamodernists might call sincere irony, as in we pointed out the thing that we're sincere with, ironically, but it's not that we're either sincere or ironic, we're both at the same time. And there's a really exquisite dance. I see this within leadership, right? Leadership has become such a cringe topic. It is so hokey. It is so like you spend a minute on LinkedIn and you've got 100 different perspectives on leadership. I personally find it's been overly tainted by old school, patriarchal, industrial kind of hero champion leader in the center, when what we're increasingly learning is that leadership itself is an emergent property and that's not centered on any individual. But as we navigate this, we still need to do some sort of oscillatory dance. Like it's still, even though it's emergent, someone sometimes needs to step up and into to be the coordinating force. But then we don't want to spend too long there, because we don't want to get in the way of emergence. So there's a hyper acuity, which I think that all facilitators naturally accrue over time, where you become aware of the oscillatory dance. You become aware, like, what does, if the room feels a little bit too stagnant on a particular thing, you've got to be the provocateur. But then if we're too scattered all over the place, you've got to kind of like rally folks into some sort of coherence. So yeah, sorry, I've just gone on a big
No, that's wonderful.
There, yeah.
That's one.
Everything's connected.
Everything is connected. And so this is what I mean, I love that you brought up LinkedIn. I think you did a post yesterday about Simon Sinek. I was actually going to send you a tongue-in-cheek article about him and someone just taking the piss out of his thought leadership.
I feel so bad. I mean, honestly, there's two parts of me. One is I do hope for that we can all hold each other to like a higher rigor and a higher standard. And I think ultimately what irks me about Simon is not him himself. He's an incredible marketer. It's just how willingly the large majority of folks will wholesomely embrace these ideas without question. And I think that ideas are something that ought to be entertained, as in we have to have some level of ironic distance from them as we compare and contrast and synthesize what is most apt in our current context. And yeah, and also Simon kind of wrote The Infinite Game, which is a big ripoff of James Carse's Finite and Infinite Games book. But yeah, that aside, I should not, yeah, it's just career limiting, so yeah, anyway, so yes, you're going to send me.
I'm with you, but I even, what's funny about that is you see like the amount of virality he gets on a post that actually is just common sense, or is, it's completely obvious, and the practicality of it within a complex organization might be really difficult. And anyway, that aside, you see the engagement on that. And then you think, okay, I mean, me, little Leanne in Brisbane, Australia, is that what I have to do to become that type of person? And it's like, do I play that game? It's like, no, but what's the alternative?
I'm in the same. I'm honestly, even I am frustrated sometimes. In social media, if you were to share general warm platitudes that are fairly innocuous, that are non-threatening and have a face validity and they're comfortable and familiar, they're more likely to be reshared. If you're sharing something that's genuinely thought-provoking, it's probably going to like give people pause, and they're going to have to think, oh, I don't know how I feel about this. And then a few seconds moves on, something else has appeared on their feed, and the time has moved on. So it is in the attention economy, it's an engagement strategy that works. The total addressable market for mediocre, midwit, banal, thoughts is a lot larger than for genuine thought-provoking things. And it's an interesting question when it comes to our work. I find that this is fair enough. Sometimes when we're called in to play the role of facilitator, it's literally the team has been working hard all year. This is an offsite or a break for them. it's important for people to feel seen and validated and heard and connected and collegiate and all of that stuff. But we don't actually have to challenge everything. We don't have it's just, and so partly it's about creating the conditions where that can manifest. But also sometimes it's about actually showing up and just creating that, holding that tension, that generative ambiguity, or asking those incisive questions that just enables us to go a little bit beyond the comfortable default ideas and notions that we've held on to for perhaps too long. And so that kind of intuitive knowing, which means that as facilitators, we kind of need to pay attention to what's happening and what ideas are getting shared around the place. But I guess ultimately, yeah, I'm still in the angst too. I don't know how to do it. Unfortunately, a long time ago, I saw the effects that social media was having in society in terms of increasing polarization, and the platforms themselves are more orientated towards people with strong opinions, and it's not geared. There's this fantastic article by Venkatesh Rao called The Internet of Beefs, where he talks about that the platforms basically incentivize disagreement. It doesn't really make sense for someone with a large following to deeply understand another person's perspective and come to concord. It makes sense to kind of keep the debates fueling on, because that's what gets attention. So I kind of left most social media platforms, but now I kind of find myself in this weird, obscure patch of the dark forest and kind of thinking, oh, maybe I need to participate a little bit more. But at the same time, when I do, I'm confronted with all the banalities, and I'm thinking, is this what people want? And now we've got AI generating, warped the distortions of the same mediocre thinking. I don't know. It's a weird space that we're in. But hey, coming back to the role that we play, gathering people in real life, in person, or even virtually, but where we're present with each other, not merely our avatars or the constructive content that we put forth, but actually in conversation together. That's a sacred thing, and that ought not. And I don't see that going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, are you noticing a shift? So it was interesting. Prior to 2020, a lot of the conversations I had with leaders about gatherings were really about driving specific outputs and actions. And now I remember having a call a couple of months ago, and a CEO is like, actually, I'm bringing my people together. We just want to connect. And I was like, well, if you just want to connect, let's just go for a long lunch. But of course, the role of facilitators, will do it professionally. So we'll build the connection, but it's, G-rated as opposed to just, have you noticed a shift?
I love that. I unfortunately, I haven't seen it that much, but I'm often promoting that, what folks need. I like how you said long lunch. I really like that as a context. And of course, the facilitators in us will, be looking at the room, and we don't want it just to be long tables where people are trapped with only the people either side. We want there to be fluidity so that people can kind of navigate, conversations as they need. But the long lunch is a contextual container, or even I love the sessions where we've done just an evening hang in a speakeasy context. It's ultimately about changing context and providing a container that is held to deepen relations or to explore a conversation or a question at depth, more depth than we can do in our day-to-day. I wish that people were more interested in that. My experience is that with the disruption that the pandemic caused, we had a window there where people were really being creative. But now I feel like there's a lot of catch up, and the events that I'm called to speak to, I'm having to chat with folks and saying there's way too much in this agenda here. And a lot of this is just information. This can be disseminated via PDF or a video or a podcast beforehand. When you gather together, let's create space so we can breathe and explore and allow for the emergence. But the unfortunate thing is it actually takes quite a bit of skill to hold that space. It's a lot easier for us facilitators or, to come up with all of our content and our stuff to take people through. But to hold that space of generative ambiguity, to hold the tension alive and have that acuity for recognizing that someone was about to say something over in the corner there, but they got spoken over by that person there. So we're going to have to make sure that we bring space for that perspective there and work out how we synthesize that. A lot of subtle, intuitive mastery is at play there. But the result is, from the client perspective, they may not see the magic of that held, nothingness that allows for the emergence. And so thus, people, I find that a lot of clients are still looking for contents and top tips and, how much they can kind of fit into the day.
I know. And I guess and then it's us to sort of influence that as well. You spoke about that, but I know when I'm in front of a group, I had that session, like it was like 130 people. It was all about that connection. And definitely my senses were heightened the whole time. Like it's quite exhausting just trying to figure that out. And then you don't go somewhere and then you think, should I have gone there? And it's all these sort of, you're just chasing your own head.
All in real time whilst you're still present with the room. Like it's huge. Yeah. What is your preparation like in terms of not just like materials and stuff, but how do you prime yourself for such days? And what's your recovery process like? I'm curious, what happens either side for you?
Actually, I felt kind of self-indulgent because in the book, I actually talk about my pre-workshop ritual. I do have a ritual. I've got a Spotify playlist. I've got some dodgy Britney Spears in it, some will.i.am. I go for a run, but it's really about, I kind of focus on myself for a bit so that when I get into the room and like even the setup for me of the room, that's when I start switching the focus off me to that environment and what I want to create for the group. So there is like a time where I switch from, okay, I'm all set. Now let's get this group set and get them all powered up as well. I'm a Virgo, so I'm like checklist, like going through that. That's like the hard stuff so that I can then chill, relax, and be present. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah. It's so funny. My wife is Virgo too. The checklists galore. She's a Things app power user. For me, I've often called it being prepared to wing it. So I resist the temptation to have too many notes or too much structure in place. It's more about the conceptual flow that I anticipate we might need. I think one of the traps that I fell into earlier in my career is I had slides or I had things that I then became anchored to. And if the reality is moving away from the preparation, you're kind of left, in that schism trying to figure out what to do. And so most of the time it's focused on getting a good sleep and probably activities that are orientated more towards mindfulness. Like my mind is in overdrive of just anticipating all sorts of potential scenarios that might emerge. And I'm just usually just trying to relax it and just as much as possible enter that trickster playful spirit where you are an external provocateur and also a caretaker for the sacred, space that is being held for these, gatherings of minds. And so that's kind of what I do. And then afterwards, I'm usually a wreck. Like I just need to have a cup of tea and read and just relax. I usually eat bad food or something, or like I'll get a pasta dish or something after. It's really bad for my health, but so wonderful to have a well-earned, pasta at the end of a good facilitated session. Not beforehand though.
I have it's funny, I've got my go-to, there's a Euro shop down the road and it's exactly, I know the order. Yeah. It takes that decision out of the equation. Great. And it's usually something like, watching a rerun of The Office US and just laughing at Dwight. And that's my ultimate.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm wondering, the other thing that I do that I don't like to do and that I didn't capture is I reflect on what I did wrong as opposed to what was really great. And I kind of have a negative bias towards my own. Is that normal or?
Yeah. So I immediately after, so one thing I'm terrible at is asking for testimonials. So because normally immediately after I'm just like, thinking of all the things like it's impossible to close all the loops and threads within something. And then you think about the different participants and they think about, maybe we probably should have like that, the way I shifted my body language there. I hope that didn't send the signal that I was discounting that idea. And all of that runs rampant. And I've had to learn to distract or, not indulge in that process because I have the proclivity to spiral. Like particularly when I'm tired and energy depleted, I get into this insecure approval seeking state where I kind of, when I check in with a client, I hope that was okay. I hope everything. And it's me being silly, but I just got to not do that. And also I have this kind of like this nebulous like warding of any feedback. Like it's too early, straight after because facilitating, you are so in amongst it and there. It's too early for any feedback, good or otherwise, because I know that I'm not going to interpret it in the right way. So it's almost like I will hear it, but it's held in suspension and not kind of embodied until after I've had a good sleep. And then I'll reflect via journaling the next day. So afterwards, I'm in my own kind of like hedonistic distraction, and I'm in a different place after a
Yeah,
session.
it's like putting that sort of just that bubble wrap over and then going, right, the next day I've had some sleep, we can take it off, and now I'm ready for this to process it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's interesting though, feedback, because there are multiple layers here. Like, here's one of the bits of advice. I'm in this phase where I've got friends giving me earnest advice on how to re-engage with social media, because I'm feeling so clueless at the moment, looking at it feels like so warped, like I just so divorced from reality, how people interact and so on. But I was taught early on, sell them what they want, give them what they need. I've been for a long time doing them like, sell them what they need, give them what they need. And then now people are telling me, sell them what they want, give them what they want, which probably like makes sense. But often, so here's the challenge I find with facilitation. When I'm getting a briefing for, say there's something quite contentious, like there's been a recent merger, we're bringing through heads of different departments from, some folks have had experience in the company for a decade, some are new from other companies. We're not really seeing eye to eye on the strategic vision. And then as I'm hearing that, I'm realizing that the person briefing me is an invested player within this dynamic. So not only that they're my client, but also there's a potential that they may have their own blind spots and not realizing that they may be getting in the way of the process of like this higher order of complexity coordination that is possible. So I have to take the client's briefing with just a slight pinch of salt and maintain my own kind of detached sense of what's actually happening. And then the best way I approach this is with this kind of like weaponized naivety in a way. And that's like, because you don't know their industry and you don't know their context, you can ask innocent questions that might otherwise be taboo, but are revealing in that context. And so sometimes it can be that the client itself, like what comes to light is that there's a big blind spot and they're actually getting in the way of this process, or it could be other things. But the feedback afterwards, it's like, it's also, if people are providing feedback immediately after, it's too soon. It's too soon, because ideally, like with these types of things, there needs to be some settling that happens afterwards. We're not talking about quick tips or obvious things to do. Otherwise, the folks would have already done it. Like the shifts that can happen from bringing folks together can be subtle and profound. And that does take time to process. I do like offsites where there's like a dinner in between, because that often means that the day two, there's been a lot of that kind of like embedding and reflecting.
Yeah.
But if it's just day one,
I'm just reflecting on, I caught up with some business friends last week, and I want to talk to you about clarity, actually, clarity and ambiguity. Clarity is like, I see it as it's a curse word in my opinion, but I'm trying to get some clarity on like future direction. And they were just telling me what they thought from their perspective. And I was resisting it, and I was saying, no, like adamantly. And the next day I woke up and I was like, maybe I should actually think about but it took like a good night of sleep, and then me sort of having that space to reflect and go, why is that strong? Why was that reaction so strong? And maybe they're both saying it. Maybe there's something in it.
Well, or maybe they need to read Michael Bungay-Steni's The Advice Trap, and and kind of the approach being actually like there's something quite subversive about planting questions as seeds and leaving that with, I feel like questions can slip past our cognitive defenses. Like I cannot stand advice. I just, even solicited advice, I'm still like, because how could someone understand the totality of our perspective? I mean, they're doing their best, but here's what's interesting though. I've just done a hike in Tasmania with my partner and some friends, and there is something to be said about what emerges on day 3 of a hike, when you've kind of burnt through all the surface level stuff, and then you kind of arrive at greater depth where there's been time to pause and think and consider. And this of course is so rare in enterprise land today, because no one has time to think or pause or consider, and so it's just jumping from one hot idea to the other. But there is something quite profound if there's time and depth. And I feel like this is something just in general in society we could do more, is just to have long hangs together. This goes back to your long lunch notion. It's like, let's not rush this. It's like, we got time.
How do we sell? I mean, I'm with you on that. But as you said, we're in a world of now like 7 hacks. I mean, I wrote the 2-hour workshop. I'm buying, but that's the market and what, people want, the tip, the accelerated path.
Even Michael's first book, The Coaching Habit, which sold over 1 million copies, is like how to have coaching conversations in 10 minutes or less. Like the time thing is a huge thing at the moment, because everyone's feeling time poor. How do we do it? I don't know.
Give me the answer. Okay, so I want to ask you. This is a question I really wanted to ask you, because this is what spurred me reaching out to you, because I read your newsletter when I was flying, and I landed, and I'm like, I've got to get Jason on my show. I love what you talked about your house words. I was wondering if you could just share the process around like what that's about, and also the 3 house words. I think there's some relation to workshop and facilitation in that.
Well, okay. So house words, I'll give you the background context for this. So house words, I mean, you'd be surprised to hear this, but I'm a bit of a nerd. But I enjoyed the Game of Thrones notions of house words, but just I have my own program, Choose One Word, chooseoneword.com. You can sign up for free. Over 70 videos to help you find one word to serve as a fuzzy contextual beacon. This is an antithesis to my PhD research and goal setting, where I got frustrated with narrow, measurable, quantitative, fixed goals. I found that the more fuzzy notion of a word allows us to navigate complexity with more grace and able to make more meaningful progress by doing so. The house words in particular, I was thinking, because Kim and I have these odd house words. They're an emergent phrase that we just found ourselves saying. House words are so awkward. It's punish the unspoken, which is the charm of a good house word is that it's not necessarily cool. It's kind of awkward and weird. Friends of ours have never pay full retail as their house words and so on. And there are others that I don't really think the article landed, because when I shared it on LinkedIn, people did a quick skim and just put, anyway, I don't think they got it. That's okay. But the interesting thing is, the reason I wrote that particular article is just the weekend before I had this kind of getaway with some friends, and they were saying things to me, we miss your old newsletters. They were so much more optimistic and upbeat and easy to read on the tram. But now I kind of have to sit down with a pot of tea and really kind of go through the links and get it all. And I feel like the pandemic brought about this indulgence in me where I genuinely was fascinated in following the threads of some important thinking. And so I tried this attempt at doing something that was a little bit more like social media friendly house words, and let's hear your house words. And it worked to a degree. The main point of this, I think, from a kind of general sense, is that I think most teams have become metric obsessed. We have our KPIs, the OKRs, and all of these like performance indicators that we narrow our focus on and we fixate upon, but there's room for more qualitative sense making of what meaningful progress looks like. And looking at it through the lens of chapters unfurling, or through teams actually rallying around an odd emergent identity. So there's this metamodern management science that's just kind of being born at the moment, where the notion of lore-craft, LORE, where we kind of talk about these emergent stories that you had to be there and only make sense for the in-group, but they become part of the in-group lore, that then when new people in the team come on, they hear this joke that it's not actually funny, and then someone else says, oh, this is referring to a time 4 years ago in an offsite where skinny dipping happened, or blah, blah, blah. And then there's something magical about that as a kind of like a cultural coordinating or kind of coherence force that I find fascinating. It was a deeper point that I think most of the busy, distracted LinkedIn goers didn't really wasn't able to land on, and that's okay.
I loved it.
Thank you.
It's funny you mentioned that Lawcraft. It's a guy in Perth, been friends for years, I haven't seen him in forever, but the conversation was just about this one night in Broome where something happened like this, and referring to another person, and it was that Lawcraft. And instantly, I mean, I was giggling reading the message, I'm sure he was giggling writing it. Instant connection from like years of not really talking to each other from that one moment.
Totally.
So powerful.
Totally. And this stuff will stay with folks no matter where they go on their careers or something. There's something quite profound about the emergent law. And the thing is, it is emergent. And if we keep coming back to this notion of emergence, right? Emergence cannot be, you can't create emergence. You can create the conditions in which emergence can manifest, but you can't say, we want this thing to emerge, because that's not emergence. In a complex system, as opposed to a complicated system, the sum is other than its parts, where in a complicated system, it's the sum of its parts. In a complicated system, like a machine, the parts relate to each other in a linear fashion, whereas in a complex system, it's nonlinear. And there's something quite profound about this distinction. A lot of particularly masculine leadership approach is to view an organization as if it were a machine, like cogs and bits like that. And a lot of male leaders in particular, masculine, I should say, as more of an energetic thing, is to come in and be the hero and fix it. And, but often these fixes address symptoms, but create unintended consequences and don't address the root cause. And if we relate to the systems as living systems, our approach is to relate to it as a complex system. And that means that we realize that we're part of the system and we can influence things. and create conditions where certain things can manifest, and approach things like even if you're trying to fix someone who was unwell, you realize that all the systems interrelate, and it's just a different disposition. And so sometimes when the stories and things emerge, they are so special, and you can hold on to them for years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like that instant connection point. What you're talking about, like that holistic approach, looking at all these different systems and the interplay. So this is where I really struggle with, like, what am I, the thought leader / expert / wizard on? You know, everyone's got a title like leadership expert, innovation expert. It's all the same thing. Like you said, it's all connected.
Yeah, gosh.
What I really struggle with that. Like,
same.
I'm comfortable in ambiguity, but it's like the market wants
Same.
clarity. So what do we, like, people like us do?
Same. Yeah, it's really nice to chat. Gosh, and by the way, can I just say it's really nice and refreshing to have such an honest conversation in space, because so many of these podcast things is yet another opportunity to preen ourselves in front of the audiences. I mean, I chose the word wizard as an archetype word because it is playfully a step removed from the normal language that folks use, but still as an archetype, it kind of points to someone who spends time studying magic, as we could consider to be an emergent phenomena at a complexity beyond our reckoning. And it's an extension of the word wise, like a wizard is like someone, and I like that. Philosophy is the love of wisdom. It kind of works for me. I personally gravitate towards archetype words, and I feel that if we can be playful in how we position ourselves there. But really, I mean, so there's a Canadian professor, John Vervaeke. He's got this 50-part YouTube series called Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. And even just watching the first episode is quite profound. But he talks very early on, the tribes that had a shaman had a competitive advantage against other tribes, because what the shaman would do, often kind of living a bit removed from the tribe itself, and sometimes doing the hallucinogenics or wearing masks or other things, the shaman was able to offer new ways of seeing, new metaphors, new ways of like understanding, perceiving the world. And this is really important for a tribe to navigate change, or to kind of enhance the complexity of tasks is able to do. I feel that's the same thing with organizations today. If they need external influence, like as an external perspective, not a thought leader with all the answers, but someone who can curiously come in and hold space and just ask those curious questions from outside of their context to help them to see things in new ways. Because without that, they might be productively working their way to irrelevance. And the role that we play as the interstitial kind of mimetic mediators, like between different mimetic tribes and stuff like that, we kind of navigate between them. And for one, group of engineers over in this area, they may have never considered things based upon the experience you've had working with a therapeutic company over there or something like that. And just it enhances the ways of seeing. And there's a profound magic to that. So I don't know what this means and what we call ourselves. Like I just find comfort in archetype because it still can communicate the essence of what we're doing. Whether it's shaman, trickster, raconteur, or you can find some.
Yeah,
some of
I think I might look into that, because I do find it very uncomfortable, and I haven't called myself anything. Like, I was thinking of like thought breeder, because it's all about just generating thoughts as opposed to just leading them. But I might look into that. My mother's from Papua New Guinea. They had sorcerers there. I wonder if I could just take anything from that context.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm viewing this through my Dungeons and Dragons lens. Like sorcerers like channel innate magics, and wizards kind of like study the world and so on. There is something there. It's got to ultimately feel congruent and apt. Like this is like, I'm so sick of hacks. Like at the moment, I was curiously just seeing what Meta's done with this Threads app and so on. And you can see at the space right now, everyone's doing all their growth hacking things to kind of build influence, and they're following everyone. They're doing and I'm so tired of the pantomime, and I'm heartened because I know there are folks out there, there are leaders out there that also don't want to just do another innovation theater or something. They actually want to do meaningful stuff. So I think I don't know, I'm right there with you. You've got all of this evidence that says that being absolutely banal and just doing what everyone else does seems to be the pathway to success. And I just intuitively, I'm reticent to engage overly in that. But at the same time, that means we're left in this ambiguous space of figuring it out.
That's right. And I work with Alan Weiss. He wrote the book $1 Million Consulting and everything else. Yeah. We caught up in Hawaii last year, and he said to me, "Leanne, you don't need clarity. You just need to be comfortable in ambiguity. That's all you need." And that really helps. But then I also look at the way that he markets, and it's very like, it's that expert in. And
I mean, I'm familiar with Alan Weiss's work, and his value-based fees was quite a profound book early on in my space. But then I find that a lot of these constructs we just need to be a lot more loose with. I find the comfort is a good thing. I think there is almost this point of, at least for me, I'm just doing therapy aloud for myself. So it's like there's this point of comfort and acceptance of not trying to, like, there's something quite that can happen when we're not trying to climb the ladder so much, and we're just more focused on value and what feel. No, this just feels so general, right? Just be true to ourselves and so on.
Like this is, yeah.
There's just, I mean, I'm just, all the temptations are there, but at the same time, we can't have game denial. Like, this is an attention economy, and the dynamics are unfortunately rivalrous. And this is a hard lesson that I've learned over the years. I mean, early on, I was quite like abundant and opportunities were shared all the time. And then I've had some folks that I used to do a lot of work with, they've gone and become consulting firms in and of themselves. So rather than being a solo practitioner, they've got a team. And naturally, when you've got a team, you've got overheads, you've got salaries to pay and so on. So any work that comes your way, you figure out within the team how you can do it. And it becomes these vortexes of opportunities where stuff goes in, but not much comes out. And that's, I kind of went into this kind of like bitter, resentful phase about that, because it was really fun when we had practitioners kind of working together and helping each other out and so on. And I think there's something there that can be rekindled. I guess what I'm suggesting here is we can't be naive about this. I've just had the last few years kind of working away in obscurity and doing deep work behind the scenes with clients, wrapped up quests and non-disclosure agreements. So I can't really talk about it. It's fascinating, but it's also removed me from the attention economy. And as these projects have been wonderful, but they begin to draw to a close, I'm now like, okay, looking at the arena, looking at it when, everyone just jabbering on about all sorts of things, like, what do I do?
I'm totally with you. The unfortunate thing is, like, I go on LinkedIn and like I'll do what I think is meant to be done to like fill the pipeline. And
I mean, hey, from an outside perspective, you probably get this all the time. I really love your, the way you show up, the energy. I loved on your website, do you want a coffee or a tea or things like that? I thought that was so cute and so fun. You're very close to something quite, like, as in, like, I find authenticity is an unhelpful word in this day and age, because we sometimes venerate this notion of a true, authentic self that we're always searching for. And the concept I've been playing with for some time is this kind of post-authentic, not anti-authentic, but post-authentic. We're less fixated upon authenticity and just more curious about what role we need to play. Like, what is if we take a role-playing approach to life, because sometimes our role is, it's if we're hanging out with our friends, we don't want to be the thought leader with our friends. But if we are in a room that is obviously looking for some sort of sense of direction, then we are the provocateurs, or we are the ones playing that role and stepping into that space with some expert perspective that may be useful to share. And so I'm finding that's a frame that I'm trying to get comfortable in, because I realize that people want Dr. Fox, the Arc Wizard of Ambiguity, on stage. They don't want Jason, the person figuring things out and chatting with you right now. They want the wizard.
Yes.
So having that role clarity is useful if we're going to be more playful and effective.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting question within a workshop is, and I love that playful, like the muse letter, and going back to the muse, and I've been listening to a lot of Stephen Pressfield, and he talks about channeling the muse. And it's almost like when you're in that moment, you have a decision to, like, do I ask that question? Do I go there? Do I call a break? Like, I feel like a lot of the time, when I feel like I'm doing a good job, I feel very planted and centered. And I honestly feel like these ideas are not coming from me thinking about it. It's like, okay, now do this. And it's almost like I am channeling the muse. Do you feel that way in those moments?
And this is great. I haven't reflected on this for a while. There's something about, you mentioned room setup before. Like, I don't know about you, but one of the things I often find when I go to a venue is that the venue organizer has some sort of OCD where they've got everything kind of geometrically arranged, classroom or grid format and so on. And the first thing I'm doing is I'm messing things up into this semi-organic kind of comfortable mess, as in not uncomfortable chaos, but like there's an inherent organicness to it. And that's partly also when people arrive, I want it to feel like we're in the lounge room hanging out with friends, more so than the formal kind of business thing where we have to be serious. And a lot of the start is kind of more, I don't know exactly. It's kind of contextual, but we do need to get to a place where we feel comfortable. And partly that means putting out some fires before they start, and misinterpretations, or I almost call out pathways of here's a few scenarios of what could happen is that we could sit here and I could be in presentation mode and I can give you things and it'll be charming and you'll write notes and you'll passively sit back and listen. And then at the end of the day, we'll feel like we've done some good work, but nothing's really changed. Or we can do the type of thing where you finally have platform to get off your chest what is the thing, and that might work. But if you're not also actually listening and then, engaging in a playful spirit, then we might just end up kind of, deepening the wounds that may be there. Or we can kind of approach it, there's this saying from Marshall Rosenberg, the pioneer of nonviolent communication. He says there are two types of games in life that we can play. The first is the game of who's right. It's a game in which everyone loses. The second is the game of making life wonderful. And I think that if we set up that frame of let's make life wonderful, let's actually playfully engage and listen and hear and contribute. So the whole thing is I'm basically setting it up so we don't wander down the wrong paths and we're trying to, but then I'm in a position where it is the muse that calls, and none of this is really, I'm prepared to wing it because energetically I prepared myself, but it's not because I'm wedded to a script or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really like how you talk about you reveal those sort of alternative paths, like you're revealing parts of the map. And
I find that we've got to win over the cynical people in the room early. And I think that just calling out that this is something that can happen. And I mean, the trope within the workshop space for us facilitators is you have someone come from outside of their context, wheeling in their box of Post-it notes and activities, and without kind of being curious about their context at all, kind of pace them through a bunch of workshop activities. And that, by the way, if you're starting out, that may be okay. And there's a difference between a workshop to teach or a workshop to facilitate and all of those things. But I find when I'm at that leadership level, when we're talking about those things, it is reassuring for someone who was on the precipice of switching off or disengaging. They actually realize, this is different. There might actually be some merit in my participation here.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh gosh, we could talk about so much. I mean, I've a ton of notes and we've gone down various rabbit holes today, which has been amazing.
We can do it again sometime.
Let's do it again. Absolutely. Yeah. Jason, if listeners, I love your website. Thank you for commenting on mine, but yours is next level. It's so cool. Where can we send listeners if they want to connect with you? Should we send them to Threads or not?
Oh gosh, yeah, no, I'm terrible on social media. So here's the interesting thing. I have foxwizard.com, which I set up to kind of be able to just write and channel all of the stuff. And that's great, foxwizard.com. But within a week's time, drjasonfox.com will be up again. And that is my kind of corporate brochure site, because I've found that the Fox Wizard stuff isn't quite connecting with the busy executives that don't have time to think. And so I've got my corporate brochure version. That's Dr. Fox, the Arc Wizard of Ambiguity, and Fox Wizard is kind of the alter persona behind it. So yeah, you can look forward to that.
Really cool. And hopefully one day I can share my archetype website as well and move off.
I look forward to it.
And have that shadow side somewhere. That'll be fun.
Yeah, we can have both. Yeah, that's right.
Amazing. Thank you so much for sharing everything you did today. We'll put a link to everything you mentioned, plus the books. You mentioned some great quotes. I've taken notes here, but I'm sure the AI transcript will do a great job too. Jason, thanks again for your time today.